Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ballhawk Sports Podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Appreciate it. We have another NFL episode today, leading off of what happened last week, where we did my 2025 NFL Draft Big Board. We're going to do a mock draft today, where I've already made all the picks. I've put it into one of the simulators online, and I will put it. If you're watching in video, you'll have it to be able to see. But I'll verbalize it as we go along. Just some things to take in mind before I get into the actual picks and why I made the picks. I did not allow myself to make any trades. I think that trades are unpredictable, and I think, especially in a year like this where the draft is more depth than top-end talent, that a lot of teams towards the top are going to stay where they are, and a lot of teams in the middle and towards the end are going to bounce around just because it's going to be about who wants to take who where and who wants to be aggressive to get their guy and who's perfectly fine falling back to take extra picks. Now, you can go back and forth on what teams are more likely to do that, what teams are not, but I decided to keep it simple and just where the teams are projected to pick as of today, the 1st of April. That's where they pick, and that's what I did. Another thing to keep in mind is I went off my draft board, so if some of these picks seem questionable to some of you out there, go back, watch the episode from last week, and that'll give you a better idea of where I have some players ranked and why I have them going where I think they should go. More so than the input that I will put out as we go along. But leading it off with the Titans at pick number 1, I have them taking a quarterback, and I have them taking Cam Ward. I think it's an easy pick for them. If they are going quarterback, it's Ward. He's easily the best option at the top with the most potential at the quarterback position. He's good. I think that he's going to make some mistakes early on. You can see some lazy footwork. You can see some issues there. But I wonder how the way that the draft process has been playing out. I think they go quarterback, which is not what I would have thought a few weeks ago. But I think I don't see Carter as a world beater. I don't see Travis Hunter as great value for the Titans, just because having a player like that on a team with no answer to anything is just not useful. So I think the best use of their pick is Cam Ward, the quarterback from Miami. Moving on to number 2, I have the Browns also taking a quarterback. I have them doing this largely because I don't think they expect to be at the top anytime soon, so they're not going to have this option again. And I have them taking Shedeur Sanders from Colorado. Now, if you watched last week's episode, I'm not high on Shedeur Sanders. I see him as a Mac Jones type, where what you get is what you see is what you get. But I don't think that's bad for Cleveland. They have some good options. They have a good tight end in Njoku. They have some good receivers, especially Judy. They should come back, get a running back. They have a decent offensive line. They have a very talented defense with Garrett staying around. So I think that they have the chance to capitalize on what they have right now. I think they go with the lower ceiling Shedeur Sanders in that spot at number 2. Now at number 3, unfortunately, you have the Giants once again missing out on those top quarterbacks, similar to last year. They won a game towards the end and therefore weren't able to draft one of the quarterbacks, which is very upsetting for the Giants fan base and me as a Giants fan. But the consolation prize here is with having Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns on the edge, I think this pick becomes very simple. It's Travis Hunter. You let him play corner. You let him play receiver as well a little bit, package deal. Give him 10, 12 plays. He doesn't need to be the number one option. They have Neighbors, so that is a huge help to him as well. And then, having him play in New York is just what the league needs. So I have the Giants taking Travis Hunter at number 3. At number 4, I have Abdul Carter going to the Patriots. This is purely top value for a position of need. They did sign Harold Landry in free agency. They have some pieces coming back. But a true dominant edge pass rusher would really help them out defensively. And Carter has the potential to do that. So once again, I think an easy pick for them. They get to just sit back and hope that one of Carter or Hunter falls in their lap. And in this case, with both quarterbacks going at the top, that is what happens. And they're able to just easy peasy take Carter and then move on. At number 5, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars taking Mason Graham. Now, this is an interesting spot. They could use some help on the O-line. They could use some help in the defensive backfield. But I have them taking an interior defensive lineman in Mason Graham just because he has the potential to be a dominant force. They have 2 great edge rushers in Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen. So getting an interior force will just help to bring that defensive line together and complete that package. And I don't see the impact that, like a Campbell or a Membo could have on the offensive line being as similar as Graham's potential on the defense. And then I also just think that getting that interior defensive lineman is more valuable to them as a team than getting a corner who could bust, who could be good, but isn't a sure thing. So I have him taking Mason Graham, and then probably circling back and getting a corner in the second round or something similar to that. That's my thinking there, especially with how deep this class is in corners. I don't think they need to reach for a corner. They can take the interior defensive lineman, the top one in the class, and just pat themselves in the back and move on. At number 6, I have I've had this pick kind of dialed in since they traded for Geno Smith, but that is the Raiders taking Ashton Jeanty. If you just think of Pete Carroll teams, what have they had? They had good running games. You had Reggie Bush at USC, and then you had Marshawn Lynch when he was in Seattle, and then even later on in Seattle, you had Kenneth Walker. So they typically have a good running back. Ashton Jeanty is the best in this class of deep running backs. So they get the best running back, and they're able to plug him into a system that will be able to use him very well. And they get to give Geno Smith and whoever else that ends up possibly coming in to play quarterback the safety blanket of a top running back. But moving on to number 7, this is where it really starts to get questionable. The Jets could use a tackle, but there's not really a right tackle out there. I mean, you can talk about Campbell or Membo moving over to right tackle. I don't see it. I mean, people are talking about both of them possibly being a guard, let alone being a tackle. I think if they were to go offensive tackle here, it would end up being Membo just because he's more suited to play right tackle than Campbell is. And they just drafted a tackle last year that they like at left side. But I have them going and getting help in the defensive backfield. I had them taking Will Johnson, the cornerback from Michigan, really just helping to pull that defense together. They were a little susceptible. They lost DJ Reed. They got to shore up that secondary. They already have a good pass rush, so nothing to worry about there. Just give someone opposite Sauce Gardner to be able to really put the screws on the offenses that they have to face. But moving on to number 8, the Carolina Panthers, I have them also taking a defensive back. I have them taking Jahdae Barron. He is the more of the playmaker of the two. Johnson is more of the cover corner guy. So I have the Panthers taking Barron and being happy that they're getting a playmaker to put opposite of J.C. Horn, who they just signed to a very lucrative extension as the league year began. They had a lot of issues on defense last year, as their stats have shown. So getting some defensive talent. You could make an argument for an edge rusher, but I think the way that the edge rushers just kind of clump together in the middle and even at the end of the first round, beginning of the second round, I think that they can wait and get a solid option. There's not going to be a defensive back playmaker of Barron's level available later on, despite the fact that some corners might be available in second round. I just think the edge class is deeper, so if they take defensive back, they get a playmaker out there that can hopefully help them to corral some of these offenses in the NFC, and specifically in the NFC South. But moving on, keeping in the NFC South, we have the New Orleans Saints at pick number 9. I have them taking Tetairoa McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona. I did think about Tyler Warren here, but they re-signed Juwan Johnson, and they still have Taysom Hill at tight end, so I figured get them another outside receiver option, especially with Olave's injury issues and his contract potentially expiring soon. So they take McMillan. They get the top receiver in the class. I think, in my opinion, the clear top receiver in the class. And they're able to help out Derek Carr and whatever young guy they happen to bring in at quarterback as well, or Spencer Rattler if they roll that option out there. But moving on to number 10, the Chicago Bears. Now, prior to free agency, I had this pick being Will Campbell, but after they did what they did, acquiring all those offensive linemen, I think that they go defensive in the draft, and for that reason, I have them taking edge rusher linebacker Jalen Walker out of Georgia. I think that he's a good swing backer playmaker, or swing linebacker rusher playmaker that can come in, cause some havoc, make some plays on the ball, and really help to be like a Swiss Army knife almost for that defense out there in Chicago. They already have Montez Sweat signed to a long-term deal, so they don't need him to come in and be a world beater at the edge position, which will be a big help for him, as his pass rushing is not as refined as some other people's are, but his raw athleticism and his playmaking ability make him a good pick here at number 10. At number 11, I have the 49ers taking offensive tackle Will Campbell from LSU. Whether they start him on the right side or not, or they start him at guard, I do think that he is the left tackle replacement for Trent Williams out there, as Trent Williams is older and probably doesn't have many years left in his great career. So they can have him learn behind him, bounce inside or bounce to the right side to start, and then bounce back to the left side when he retires, when Williams retires. But it's a good pick. He's the most NFL-ready offensive lineman in the draft. He showed out well in the drills. He has really good tape as a left tackle at LSU, where he faced a lot of top-end talent in the SEC. So he's a proven guy. Some flexibility there as well, like I said, at least to start for him. And then I expect him to be the left tackle a few years down the road at the very least. But moving on to number 12, the Cowboys here are a real wild card. I do think this is as far as Janty will fall. I think if Janty is available at 12, he is a Cowboy. But I don't expect him to go past 6 at the Raiders, let alone also getting past the Bears. Also could be a team that won't let him pass. But I think this is as far as he will go. But because we have him going at 6, I have them taking offensive tackle Armand Membo. They are a team. They need offensive line help. They need to protect Dak Prescott, keep him healthy. And they have a really good track record of drafting athletic linemen and turning them into something special. So they take Membo here, who is more athletic and raw than some of the other tackles that are available right now and in this draft, but has great potential and could start at right tackle, could start at left guard for them, could become their left tackler for them. Who knows? But I have them taking him and being able to develop his athleticism better than some other teams might be able to. But going on to 13, pick 13 is the Miami Dolphins, and I have them taking Kelvin Banks Jr., the offensive tackle out of Texas. They need offensive line help. You got to keep Tua healthy, otherwise that's just going to be a problem. You don't want Zach Wilson running out there at quarterback for multiple weeks. So I had them taking a tackle here. Banks is a prototypical left tackle. Should slide right in there, or at least push the guys that are there. Patrick Paul can move to the right side. But I expect him to be the left tackle there in Miami, and just keeping his pass rush techniques, as his run blocking isn't as well defined, but also not as needed at a team like Miami. So I think it's a good fit, and I think both the player and the team get what they need. At 14, I have Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State, going to the Indianapolis Colts. Warren is a great safety blanket for a team in the Colts that have quarterbacks that need it. Whether it's Daniel Jones or especially if it's Anthony Richardson, having a great tight end like him over the middle to just, eat up space, catch those seam routes, those quick out routes, hitch routes at the yard marker on third down, is really just a big piece of the puzzle that's missing and has been missing, really since Dallas Clark left and retired. So they get Tyler Warren, great tight end, great receiving option at tight end, to be able to slide in there and just be that safety blanket for the quarterback that definitely needed, especially Richardson. If they want Anthony Richardson to work, I think this is a necessary pick. Moving on to pick number 15 in the Atlanta Falcons, I have them taking James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher from Tennessee. They really need help rushing the passer. They tried to do that last year by acquiring Matthew Judon from the Patriots. That didn't work out very well, as he only had 5.5 sacks. And then he is unsigned as of right now. So they take James Pierce Jr. He's got speed, he's got athleticism, he's a little raw. They probably look to maybe double up and take another edge rusher in the second or third round. But I think that he's the best option for them out there, and he definitely has the most potential of the guys left. So I have them taking a shot and hoping they can develop Pierce Jr. into being a top edge rusher. And then at 16, I have the Arizona Cardinals also taking an edge rusher. I have them taking Mike Green to put across from Josh Sweat, who they just signed from the Eagles. Green out of Marshall is a smaller school prospect, so he hasn't exactly shown that he can do it at the top level, but more of a complete power rusher. Good compliment to Josh Sweat, who's more of a finesse pass rusher. And he should also be able to set the edge well in the run game, which is something they need as well, as their defensive line and their front seven in general in Arizona did not have a good year last year. And I think that he's a more complete player than some of the other edge rushers that are more like pass rush only or pass rush more developed. So, maybe a little bit lower of a ceiling, but much higher of a floor on Green. And I think the Cardinals are happy with that. But at 17, I have the Cincinnati Bengals taking edge rusher Michael Williams from Georgia. They need someone to either put across from Trey Hendrickson, or they need someone to replace Trey Hendrickson if he is traded or happens to sit out the year because he doesn't get a contract extension. And I think Michael Williams is their guy. He's going to be more of like a rotational pass rusher early on in his career, as he's not great against the run. He's a little thin for what you'd like as an edge setter, but still great option, good athleticism, and you can project on what he could be. It'll be on the Bengals to develop that, which they haven't been the best at doing that, unfortunately for them, but Michael Williams definitely has a chance to be that guy. And also amongst these edge rushers that are here, is one of the guys that could bounce to an outside linebacker if needed. So, rotational pass rusher to start his career hopefully develops into something more for the Cincinnati Bengals. But going on to pick 18, I have the Seattle Seahawks taking Josh Simmons, offensive tackle from Ohio State. They have a good left tackle in Charles Cross. And honestly, if I didn't have 3 edge rushers going off the board right before they picked, I probably have the Seahawks with an edge rusher. But because we just had a bunch go off the board, they'll sit a little bit. They'll take one of the tackles, Josh Simmons, put him on the right side across from Cross, and give Sam Darnold someone to help keep him off the ground and keep him upright, able to throw the ball. But moving on to pick 19, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I have them taking Jihad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama. This pick was hard on both accounts, as I don't know who is going to value an inside linebacker like Campbell in the first round, which is the grade that he has in my eyes. It'll just be interesting to see what teams think that a first round pick is worthy of that position. So with the Buccaneers having picked Devin White in the past as an inside linebacker and then watching him play well for them, I have him doing it again with Jihad Campbell. He'll be able to slide right in there next to Levante David, and just be a difference maker and a playmaker in the run game and potentially in the pass game as well at the inside linebacker position. And at number 20, I have the Denver Broncos taking Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver from Ohio State. I went back and forth on Egbuka and Golden as the option here. With them signing Evan Ingram, I think that takes them out of the Colston Loveland possibilities, which was a popular pick that I had for them here at 20, just because I don't think Warren falls this far. So I have been taking Egbuka. He is kind of similar in profile to Cameron Sutton, so you could look for them to possibly move Sutton or not re-sign him and let Egbuka fill that role later on. But he can play opposite of Sutton for now and produce as it showed with him opposite Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. He has the potential, and he's a well-rounded receiver. So not like you have less to project for Egbuka. You can kind of see what he is as a receiver. And for that reason, I have the Broncos going with him over Matthew Golden. Moving on to 21, I have the Steelers not taking quarterback Jackson Dart, who I think is a possibility here. I have them taking Omarion Hampton, the running back from North Carolina. I like the Steelers potentially for like Jalen Milroe or Will Howard in like the second, third round. Rather than Jackson Dart here, where I think that you have unnecessary expectations on a guy like Dart in Pittsburgh. That's really hurting for a quarterback since Big Ben retired. I think they fumbled the ball last year with the Justin Fields, Russell Wilson situation. I think they should have started Fields until he either didn't perform or they stopped winning, which they didn't. When Wilson got healthy, they sat Fields down, and they never gave him a shot after that. And then, fittingly, he left. I would have left too. So I had him taking the running back to replace Najee Harris and to be able to play with Jalen Warren. Hampton is more of a one cut in between the tackles back, similar to what they wanted Najee Harris to be. And a good complement for Jalen Warren, who's more of the scat back, third down back for them out there in Pittsburgh. But moving on to number 22, I have the Los Angeles Chargers taking Michigan tight end Colston Loveland. I think part of this is a tie-in to Harbaugh, who was Loveland's coach in college before coming over. I also think that they have a huge needed tight end. I think that Herbert is a guy that would benefit from having a better tight end. Loveland is a complete tight end. He'll be a good run blocker, which will help with the fact that Harbaugh likes to run the ball, and they just signed Najee Harris to do so. And then also being able to catch the ball over the middle and in the red zone. Is coming off injuries, so there's a little bit of question marks there. He is not as good as a receiving threat as Warren is, but more complete as a player, and a very safe pick to be able to take him here, and kind of continue to round out that passing attack and that offense in LA. But at number 23, I have the Packers taking a little bit of a surprise pick. I have them taking Shavon Ravel Jr., the cornerback from East Carolina. I'm really high on Ravel. I think that he is like a Cooper DeJean type, where he's getting a little slept on because he was hurt. He played on some lesser competition at East Carolina. But I think that he has the potential to prove that he is the top cornerback in this class. And for that reason, I have the Packers taking the chance on him. They've already talked about possibly moving off of Jair Alexander. I don't expect them to pay him again. So they have a needed cornerback. I think that he's the best available for them right now at this spot. Fits their scheme better than like a Trey Amos would. So I have him taking Ravel and helping out at the cornerback position, especially after they just lost Stokes to, I believe it was the Raiders. But moving on to number 24, I have my Minnesota Vikings taking Kenneth Grant, the interior defensive lineman from Michigan. This is a little bit of a luxury pick as they sign Jonathan Allen. But in the conference that they have, where they're going to need to beat Detroit, who run the ball. They're going to need to beat Green Bay, who run the ball. They're going to need to beat Philadelphia, that runs the ball. I think that they need to beef up on the interior. So getting another interior defensive lineman to go next to Allen, and really complete that defensive line look for the Vikings is a really good spot for them. And something they need to do. This is a team that you could see, that I could see them trading back. So if you're looking for a spot of like, hey, where could someone trade up to take Jackson Dart? Who's gonna move around? I think this 24th pick for the Vikings is a really good spot to look for that to happen. Just because there's a lot of teams underneath them that have similar needs, particularly at edge rusher. And at the offensive line position. So, a team like Washington could look to jump, Detroit and Baltimore and the Rams, or, Buffalo could look to do the same. So look for this to possibly be a spot for a trade. But because I'm not doing any trades, I had them taking Kenneth Grant here, and finishing off that defensive line. At 25, I have the Houston Texans taking Matthew Golden. I think this is a really good spot for him. I did look and think maybe offensive tackle here. I think potentially if you see like Kelvin Banks or Josh Simmons start to fall down the draft board, you could see the Texans trade up to take one of them to play left tackle, now that they have traded away Laramie Tunsil. But I think this is a really good spot for Matthew Golden, being a little bit more raw at receiver, going here to Texas and Houston, where they have Tank Dell to play the slot. They have Nico Collins to be the possession receiver on the outside. They allow Matthew Golden to just fill that Z position and just be a deep threat and kind of learn receiver while he's doing that. So I think it's a really good fit here, and got CJ Stroud, another weapon. But moving on to number 26, I have the LA Rams taking Gray Zabel, the offensive lineman from North Dakota State. Now here, the website that I used had him as a guard. I see him sticking at tackle, which is why I see him going to LA and probably playing right tackle for them. He could also play guard for them. I think that he'd be good at either spot, but I think he can play right tackle for them. They did sign their tackle Jackson back to play left side. I think he's going by Alaric now. He was AJ. So the Alaric Jackson can stay on the left side. Zabel can go to the right side, and really get those strong bookends for Matthew Stafford to possibly make another run this year and hopefully get over the hump of the Eagles that they almost did last year. At number 27, I have the Ravens taking Shamar Stewart, edge rusher from Texas A&M. If you didn't listen to last week's episode, Stewart is one of the guys that came in like 25 pounds lighter than he was listed at, and then showed the athleticism that he can be an edge rusher. But I think the Ravens could make really good use out of the versatility that he would provide, possibly being a 5 tech and then a 7 tech, rushing off the edge, moving inside if needed. I think the Ravens have always valued versatility, especially on defense. So I think that this is a really good spot for Stewart. He also can be a guy that can just learn, rotate in, and not need to have as much pressure on him to be a top-end pass rusher. And I think that's a good spot for them and a good piece for the Ravens to get. But moving on to number 28, I have the Lions taking Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle from Oregon. This is another good fit for Stewart, but because I have Stewart going at 27, I have them taking Derek Harmon here. I think that they have a need on the interior defensive line, specifically opposite Aleem McNeil, who is more of like a nose tackle for them. So he gets to play the 3, possibly like a 5 tech as well, but stay more on the inside when he's pass rushing, especially. And with Aiden Hutchinson coming back and Preston Smith being on the edge for them out in Detroit, I don't think that edge rusher is as much as a need where they can need to take a guy. So they take an interior defensive lineman, get to finish off that line, similar to what Minnesota did. And they take Harmon, put him inside next to McNeil and inside of Hutchinson and Smith, and just finish out that look, and then possibly circle back in like the second or third round, take an edge rusher who is more of a rotational guy that can rotate with Smith rather than taking a guy in the first round that supplants Smith. But at 29, I have the Commanders taking cornerback Trey Amos. I really like his fit as in Dan Quinn's system. He's a longer, more of like a zone press man, possibly corner, that can develop under Dan Quinn and really be a difference maker for the defensive backfield out there. And I think among their needs, I think that a cover corner is a big one, as they have to face AJ Brown and Devontae Smith with the Eagles. They have to face CeeDee Lamb with the Cowboys. They have to face Malik Neighbors with the Giants in their division twice a year. So I think they need a corner, and this really helps give them insurance if Marcus Lattimore continues to have injury issues, or just a good option opposite Lattimore. But at 30, I have the Bills taking edge rusher from Texas A&M, Nick Scorton. He is going to be a guy that's going to rotate in, which is what they need, as they have some guys out there that can be good against the run, but not as great against the pass. Opposite of Greg Rousseau, who just signed a nice contract extension. So I think Nick Scorton can be a good rotational pass rusher, third down guy. Less polished than a guy like Mike Williams, which is why he is available here at 30. But definitely someone that they can develop well in Buffalo, as they have proven they can do. And I think part like luxury pick here, as they also signed Joey Bosa. But you can project on Scorton being something larger than what he is right now. And I think being able to develop in that Sean McDermott system will be a big help for him and a big boost for the Bills down the line. Although you might not see him play as much as you'd hope out of a first round pick this coming year. But moving on to pick 31, I have the Kansas City Chiefs taking Josh Conerly Jr., the offensive tackle from Oregon. I think they have a huge need at tackle on both sides, so you could see them double dip. I see Conerly Jr. as a more raw left tackle than you'd like on a perennial Super Bowl team like the Kansas City Chiefs are. But he has the best projection amongst the tackles that are left, and he is a guy that will stick on the left side and not, I don't think, there'll be any questions that he needs to kick inside or play right tackle instead. So they get the best available left tackle. There's another spot where I think this is a little bit of a reach pick, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. With the reigning Super Bowl losers here, and Patrick Mahomes needs to be protected and kept upright. So it's a pick that's needed. But moving on to the last pick of this mock draft, I have the Eagles taking safety Malik Starks out of Georgia. He is about as perfect as a replacement for C.J. Gardner-Johnson as you could find. Had a down year last year. The Eagles aren't going to care. They're going to be happy with the value that they get with Starks. As 2 years ago, he was a top safety, projected like top 20 pick easy. But because he had a down year, didn't put up the numbers he did the previous year, and he didn't test out amazingly defensive or athletically. So he falls a little bit. The Eagles pick him up and are very happy about that. Now that is the first mock draft that I have for you guys. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, please leave them down below. I'll be happy to answer them. But this is how I see it shaking out. When this is a big if the two quarterbacks go at the top, I do think Ward goes number one, so I think it's really on the Browns, because I don't think with the Giants signing Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson that they will be taking a quarterback at number 3. I think if Hunter's available, that'll be their pick. If it's only Carter available, it's a potential question. They might just take Carter and then choose to not re-sign Kayvon Thibodeau. I think they want Hunter. I think that's the guy that they're going to go with if he's available. So, like I said, this is how I have it shaking out with the two quarterbacks at the top. You can look at this a lot of different ways. I think if you project a Sanders fall, a lot of this changes, which, I might do in a future episode. But from what I'm hearing and what I think will happen, I think this is how it shakes out. But thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will see you next week.